It seems to me that good melodrama uninhibits the truth about us all. But of course, with Technicolor, Sirk and Russell Meddy, his cinematographer, found a palette that was every bit as uninhibited as the crazy stories. Just go with all the insanity and treat it as seriously as he would one of the Euripides plays he used to direct back in his theater years. I think he really pulled it off. Those are words from director Guy Maddin on Douglas Sirk's 1954 film Magnificent Obsession. Seeing Faces in Movies is a podcast where each month I focus on the works of a different director or cinematographer, and each week I invite a guest on to discuss a film and the artist's filmography. I'm your host, Felicia, and we're talking about Magnificent Obsession today. So quick synopsis of the film is a rich playboy whose recklessness inadvertently causes the death of a prominent doctor tries to make amends to his widow and falls for her in the process. Tagline for the film is the story of a woman's need for a man that will become one of the greatest emotional thrills of your lifetime. The film stars Jane Wyman as Helen Phillips, Rock Hudson as Bob Merrick, Agnes Moorehead as Nancy Ashford, Otto Kruger as Randolph, and Barbara Rush as Joyce Phillips. It's written by Robert Bleeth, Sarah Y. Mason, Victor Herman, Finley Peter Dunn, based on Wells Root's adaptation of Lloyd C. Douglas's novel. Cinematography by Russell Meddy, directed by Douglas Sirk, edited by Milton Carruth, music by Frank Skinner, costumes by Bill Thomas, and special effects by David S. Horsley. Today, my guest is Josh Cooley. He was on our previous series on Cronenberg, and we discussed Naked Lunch, so I'm so glad to have you back, Josh. Thanks for coming on for our Sirk series.
Thank you for having me. I'm very happy that you would have me back after that episode too.
It was great. No, it was great. That's a widely listened to one because I can see I try not to look at the numbers, but I can always see which ones people gravitate towards. And I mean, Naked Lunch is a big Cronenberg film. You did a great job. We're here to talk about Douglas Sirk. And before we get into Magnificent Obsession, I would love to hear what your relationship is to his work. If you're a fan of...
Well, I've seen 5, I guess, the big ones, Magnificent Obsession, Written on the Wind, Tarnished Angels, All That Heaven Allows, Imitation of Life. Started with Imitation of Life and really liked that one. I think that one, well, I'll get into that later, but that was the one that brought me in probably the pandemic, during the early days of the pandemic to try to look up more of his work. And so that was when I saw, I think I'd seen Imitation of Life and All That Heaven Allows kind of early, but then I saw Written on the Wind, Tarnished Angels, and Magnificent Obsession in a very short amount of time during the pandemic. And they got a little bit muddled together for some reason, even though they're very different. And then rewatched All That Heaven Allows and Imitation of Life during that point. So it's a little bit of a soup, but that's so not a widely varied knowledge.
I mean, hey, you've got his biggest Hollywood hits. So I think that's more than enough. And that's a great place to start off with, especially, with this series. I do agree that some of the films get muddled, especially if it's been a while since you've watched them, even though they are different once you watch them. You're like, oh, okay. But I first saw Sirk when I was in university in one of my film classes, and I couldn't for the life of me remember if it was All the Heaven Allows or Magnificent Obsession that I'd watched. I know I'd seen both at some point, but it wasn't until I was rewatching Magnificent Obsession that I was like, oh, this definitely was not the one that I watched in class. Just because I remember her plaid shirt, which is in All the Heaven Allows. I was like,
Yeah.
there's no plaid in this. But they are quite different, but they are similar in a lot of ways, as well, which we will get into. To start things off, I think where I want to start things off is when we think about Sirk, when you read anything about Sirk, the word melodrama comes up. It's hard not to think of that word, the genre, in connection with him. And I bring this up because I want to read one quote. It'd be the only quote I read in the episode, but it was one from a book that I'm reading called Sirk on Sirk by Jon Halliday, where he interviewed him later on in his career. At this point, he'd already retired. And it's the only it's the only book on Sirk ever written, because he was kind of forgotten after he retired, and he only had a resurgence much later on post his passing. But the author writes, the power of all Sirk's best films is dramatic, not melodramatic. And the reason why they have survived an undiminished impact is because they are warm human emotions, especially of difficult choices, requiring unusual courage and of love in extreme circumstances are love thwarted. I found that interesting because it's early on in the book before he gets into the interviews. And I agree with most of that statement, except for the part where he says his best films are dramatic, not melodramatic. I say that because as someone who loves melodrama, and I hate that that word has negative connotations. I think what he's saying is that they can't, because he loves them, they're not melodramatic, because in his mind, melodramatic or melodrama is not good. Wondering how you feel about that genre as it relates to Cirque and in general people's mindsets on that, including your own.
I guess I don't know if how common this was, but my first introduction to melodrama and particularly Sirk was it oh gosh, Todd Haynes' Far From Heaven in
Hmm.
like 2002, I think. With that wonderful Elmer Bernstein score. Sorry, can't stop mentioning the scores. But the I was like, this is really great because it was doing this sort of, highly theatrical, very stylized, very expressive, way of dealing with these real things, these real, problems that people have, these real problems that people face, and doing it in this way that, you could say it's corny, you could say whatever, but or even campy, and it can, you know, lean into camp sometimes, but I think they give people permission to kind of, feel those emotions a little bit more realistically because, kind of like adding horror or adding comedy in a horror movie. It gives you that little bit of a release to say, well, I have a little bit of distance from this, but, uh, you know, and I really appreciate that as somebody that really loves a little bit of comedy touches throughout, which is kind of what I liked Magnificent Obsession. I mean, it starts out as a hoot. I mean, that whole
Hmm.
sequence, the speedboat. But the so I love that you can have things that are like the scene towards the end where Jane Wyman gets the diagnosis that there's no hope, and it is that is absolutely painful. If you can enter into that, and you empathize with that character in any way, that's a really horrible moment. And I feel like, especially for cinephiles, people that are loving visual media, it's especially a harsh sentence for. So I appreciate the form. I when I was looking at this, I kept on sort of cheekily thinking of Joel Schumacher at his most indulgent and over the top, particularly his Batman movies in the '90s, when he was most unleashed. And but it's unkind. It's more like to use one of your favorites, De Palma, in the way that he uses those kinds of the big score and the beautiful cinematography, the lush colors and everything to really just like attack the senses and overwhelm you. And but in a really comforting way, not in sort of a slapdash Michael Bay kind of way.
Hmm.
These Cirque in particular feels incredibly controlled. You feel like everything is just really being pushed and molded, and and pushed to these unrealistic levels. This movie is designed to an inch of its life. But sorry, that was a little bit more than you asked. But yeah, melodrama.
No.
I when I'm really in the mood to get a little weepy, I'm 100% down.
I mean, same. I'm almost always in that mood, but I agree with everything you said. I think, especially when you say that it's, sweeping emotions, but it also is controlled. I think that when people think melodrama, they think it's mostly over the top, but feeling emotions, getting something like a diagnosis that you're either blind or you have an illness that is likely uncurable. I think that most of us would react in a way that might seem in other circumstances over the top and melodramatic, but it makes sense within the scope of the situation. I think heightened emotion is still human emotion. And I think what he does in his films is heightened emotion, but it is still very controlled. I don't think he's doing it in a way to ever make fun of the characters or ever take advantage of their feelings. He's doing it with a lot of love and grace. And that's what I always love about that. So I think that it's not wrong or bad to call his films melodramatic or melodramas because they are. He also has said himself he considers them melodramas and he loved specifically, filming stories about American families and their internal dramas. You did talk about one thing, because I do want to give a little bit of history on Sirk himself, but I'll give a little point at the end of his life because we're talking about a film about a woman who goes blind. Sirk unfortunately ended up going blind at the end of his life, which obviously was very upsetting to him, to anyone it would be. But as someone who has such a keen eye for detail, it was devastating to him, and he passed away not longer after he lost his sight, unfortunately. But he lived a very interesting life. He is a German, born and raised in Germany, and he, interestingly enough, didn't leave Germany until 1940. So this is, mid World War II, despite the fact that he was incredibly left leaning and incredibly anti Nazi. So he didn't leave for two reasons. His first wife, who he had a child with, they divorced when the child was like 4. She became a Nazi and enrolled the son into Nazi camps and prohibited Sirk from seeing the son because when he remarried a Jewish woman. So he was unable to see his son, but his son was also a film actor before he got drafted. So the only time he could see his son was in the movies. He never heard from his son ever again, and he just assumes he died once he got drafted and was in the war on the Nazi party, unfortunately. The other reason why he didn't leave is because he was a huge theater director before he became a film director. And he was very interested in leftist stories and he would put on plays of that. The Nazi Party really liked his work, but kept trying to get him to make, right wing work, and he wouldn't. So they took his passport away. So he couldn't leave the country. He eventually maneuvered his way once he started making films in Germany. He kind of tricked them into needing to film something in Italy, escaped to Italy, and then just was like, I'm not going back to Germany. So him and his wife left from Italy and went to America. So a little bit of stuff there. Also, he did fight in World War One because he was drafted for Germany, and he hated anything to do with killings or death, and he hated movies about that, which it's odd because he did make some other films, not any of the films that we will be discussing in the series or that most people know. There are some Westerns, some Roman Empire movies that do have some killing, but they're so soft that you could tell that he just was like, I don't want to deal anything with this. He loved to just talk about human emotion and not think about anything that had anything to do with death because he was surrounded by that. So
Great. That's amazing.
it is. I think reading all that is very interesting because you would never think. I just didn't even assume any of that. I knew that he was German, but assumed that like a lot of German directors at the time who were in film making films there escaped before the war started, or once they started realizing, oh, they might start wanting me to do propaganda films. So it's interesting and it's very sad to hear why he couldn't get out for a while. But I think that's also why he's attracted to certain stories, something like Magnificent Obsession that has been described as something like fluff,
Really?
or what, yeah, I've seen people write it as fluff, or what they used to call them as like women's pictures, uh, which is a term on its own. Obviously, it's not something you would use nowadays, but he was kind of described as like the king of women's pictures, which is very interesting. This Magnificent Obsession is the second adaptation of the story. So it's based off a novel by Lloyd C. Douglas of the same title from 1935, and he, oddly enough, was a pastor. The novelist of this, I haven't read it. I heard it oddly enough has never been out of print, this book. And Douglas Sirk said that when he eventually got approached by his producer to make it, he tried to read the book and he said it was unreadable and that it was unfilmable. He just said the writing was awful, but they managed to do something based off of the 1935 version and updated it. So I know the purpose of this episode is not to compare and contrast the two, but I do think it's good to put into context the first one. So I know you did also watch the original adaptation with Irene Dunn and Robert Taylor. We both watched it recently because we both didn't really know about it before this. Most people don't. I do think it's important to, without getting into so much detail about the original adaptation, to talk about the way Sirk uplifted the story. I'm wondering how you feel about his adaptation of the story, because the beats are essentially, for the most part, the same, but they feel like two different movies.
Oh yeah, very much so. I was really interested to watch it. I was so glad that it was included in the Criterion Blu-ray
Hmm.
as its own disc, and looks great. It's funny because I had only seen the Cirque one time before, and it was during the beginning of the pandemic, and I was having a drink or two sometimes with those movies, and so my memories are a little bit hazy. But as soon as I put on the 35, 36 version, whatever it was, and we got to the scene with the where the woman comes to meet Irene Dunn and say, I want to repay what your husband paid for me. I was like, oh my God, it all flooded back. Everything
Hmm.
flooded back. And but anyway, the things that I think Cirque did so much better on this one were just changing the focus, making sure that certain things were a little bit more telegraphed, so they didn't come out of left field, like Rock Hudson becoming a surgeon. But the it still does feel a little bit fast, that part, but the original, you can just it highlights all of the strengths of the Cirque version, and it's really great to watch them, the earlier version, and then the Cirque version, because you can just see like how shifting the focus, opening with that hilarious speedboat sequence. I mean, it's just really fun and visually interesting. I don't know what on earth kind of speedboat that is. It looks like a rocket ship, but it's way better than this completely nondescript opening in the other film. I think the other film made a big mistake by trying to make it equally the Irene Dunn and Robert Taylor's movie. It should be the male lead, movie, because he's the one that changes. I mean,
Hmm.
yes, the main female lead, she changes, but it's really because of him. I mean, it's just destroying her life at every turn. But to make it more focused on him, and to give him the agency a little bit of he's the one that figures out that she's the wife of the man that he inadvertently killed, by taking up the life saving device at the wrong time. And instead, in the 30s version, she's the one that finds out. So it's a little bit more. I don't know, the the Sirk version feels more sure-footed about with the plotting. There's too much comic relief in the 30s version. You think that the chauffeur is going to be this kind of like, more interesting character, and he does kind of like let his shtick go at some point, but he's still not really well utilized. That whole drunk scene that goes on way too long with him and the guy that couldn't return the money, really unnecessary. You don't need that character at all. It also, I feel like, it cleans up a little bit of the weird sort of new agey logic of the Magnificent Obsession corridor of power or whatever.
Yeah.
Honestly, in every viewing, I kind of glaze over a little bit because I feel like I'm,
Mm,
being talked to by someone who's got 1,001 platitudes on their walls or whatever. And it also kind of runs into prosperity doctrine Christianity,
mhm,
but it avoids that by making you give away everything, it's just really weird. It's such a strange thing to include Jesus and then like make it a cult, I guess a new agey cult kind of thing. But also it can't be a cult because you can't tell anybody, because the first rule of Magnificent Obsession
mhm.
talk about Magnificent Obsession. But yeah, I thought he improved it in every way. Yeah, I mean, just I hate to go over be annoying about scores, but I think the music in Cirque's version is really fun. It gets so big in the choir and the playing of Jesus, Joy of Man's Desiring, putting that in there in this really weird, elaborate way during that one of those, particularly that near the end when she's at her lowest point,
Mhm.
and she goes out on the balcony and knocks over like the flower pot or whatever. It's way more emotionally satisfying too. I mean, I do get a bit I feel a bit of distance, emotional distance from it for the most part. But there are those moments where you just can't help, in the Cirque version in particular, just really, it's almost like a horror movie when you say, don't go in there, don't, the farcical elements of, this whole thing with the, when she's blind, coming up to her and pretending to be somebody else. And your voice
Yeah.
sounds here. And when to find out, no, it's not a big deal. I love how it's not a big deal in both versions. And I think the younger friend's dialogue is word for word when she tells Merrick off, after he's revealed, or after
Oh,
she
yes.
meets him, I may be wrong, but everything else that they changed, I thought was much to the betterment of the film. They really just, and gosh, again, I mean, I said before, designed to an inch of its life. I mean, Rock Hudson's car, it's so beautiful. I get distracted by it. That's another reason why I kind of think about the Joel Schumacher stuff. It gets a little bit so designed, almost Guillermo del Toro, where it's
Mm.
distracting. It's the most beautiful hospital I've ever seen in my life.
Yes.
It's almost like the bright version of something like Cronenberg and Dead Ringers, because it's something
Mm.
you'd never see in a real hospital. And I think it really, I was reminded this time in particular of the sets in Her, Spike Jones, Her. They
Okay.
had this sort
Yep.
of like frosted glass with leaves against it, in a lot of places. I wonder if it was influenced by that hospital set. I thought, yeah, like I said, sorry, it just he improved it in every way.
No, I agree. I I like the 30s version, but I think there's a reason why this stood the test of time versus that one, despite the fact that, oddly enough, uh, both films made the male actors bigger stars post their performances in these roles. So Robert Taylor got his breakout in this, Rock Hudson got his breakout in this. But I think that Sirk understood the nonsensical parts of the story without, again, making fun of it and just being like, you know what, let's have a bit of fun with this while also still taking it seriously though. And I do want to talk about the music. I definitely want to expand on that because in the third segment, because he worked very often with the Frank Skinner, who's a composer on that one. So I want to expand on that, and I also want to talk quickly right now. Well, not too quickly, but talk about you saying he has a very keen eye for detail because that's very prevalent in all of his films, very much here. On this watch, and actually just tracking back 2 seconds, his producer, Ross Hunter, was also, he liked to make movies that had very particular set designs and set dressing. He could care less about the story. He was like, I need this to look fantastic. And it does. On this watch, I noticed that in almost every scene, or frame, there's flowers or greeneries.
Yes.
I was like, wait a minute. It took a like, because I was like, oh, these are pretty, these are cute. But then, like, even through a window, you see a tree, or there'll be like a little vase with either flowers or greenery. And it's like in almost every scene, like, the actors, the characters are surrounded by either flowers or greenery for whatever. And I think I was like, I'm glad that you also noticed this because I was like, I don't know if you hadn't noticed it, maybe we don't need to go super in depth on it. Wondering how you feel about that because it obviously could signify a multitude of things. I think that part of me saw it as kind of showing their wealth without showing monetary wealth because they talk about how rich he is, but I didn't really see too much of it. You don't really see too much of it. And you don't really see a lot of their house either. They're often outside or they're in a room, they're in a car, they're in a hospital. So we know that they have money. She doesn't really have money. He's kind of covering for her without her knowing it, but she did have money. But I think the lavishness of the flowers and all the greenery around them shows a type of wealth, but also kind of represents how they're feeling in certain scenes. I'm wondering how you felt about the use of nature in the film.
Well, I think it stands out in this one, and particularly in contrast to the black and white 30s one, which I have a few other points on too. I'd like to make
Mhm.
because I never think about them in the moment. But first, the flowers, because it's obviously silver and gray. The original film to have this lavish Technicolor thing filled to the brim with bursting color. It's really just eye opening. It's almost I mean, it's kind of like Wizard of Oz. When she opens the door to watch that first one and then this one because it's just bright Technicolor. But I remember, and this has been some years there on the commentary for Imitation of Life. Somebody, I wish I had listened to it to prepare, but someone says that commentary that the producer was very particular about putting flowers and jewelry and beautiful dresses in these movies because he did see them as what you said earlier, women's pictures, and he wanted to fill them with beautiful things. And so something like Imitation of Life, which was later, it really does, those gowns really kind of take over and some of the scenes. And so, I think there's a good deal of that. And so, it's sort of, I'm sure probably it's about making the most of the Technicolor process so that it really pops. But the lilacs definitely play a part in the story, and they're around. I think in several different scenes, and then they become this motif later on when Hudson's trying to woo her again. So I think there are probably deeper reasons than that. And I'm sure Sirk had
Mhm.
come up with more reasons for that. But I do think that it might have been as simple. I mean, at least that's how it's been explained by another scholar on something that I barely remember. So, yeah, hell of an insight. I know. I'm sorry.
No,
Uh,
I think that's like probably fully correct. That's why when I was watching it, I was like, I don't know how much I should read into this or if it is just like, let's add beauty
yeah.
to the scene, which hey, I loved it. It looks great.
And I mean, I always, it's so funny. I've only seen like three Max Ophuls films, but I His work, particularly in Lola Montez, I think, is so, and also another, his only color film, is so vibrant and full of life and amazing, that I just compare every, especially Technicolor film with,
Mm.
highly composed visuals. I compare it to Ophuls and Lola Montez, and I think that there are several points in this movie. I mean, Sirk is definitely not nearly as showy as Ophuls with the camera, movements and stuff, and playing with, planes and stuff. But he's just so smooth. It's almost like that steady hand of, Kubrick or something, that just so draws you in, because it's very steady and very, assured. But sorry, before I forget, the things
Mm.
I think better than the 30s version, the scene, it's always going to be funny, probably, maybe, it's hard to say, when the blindness happens, the accident that causes the
Yeah.
blindness. But in the 30s version, it's practically that scene in Meet Joe Black when Brad Pitt gets thrown around by the cars,
Oh
on the
gosh.
road. It's just, I feel like it goes on just a little bit too long, and it's just a little too funny, and it really comes out of left field. The Cirque one, because it happens so fast, it's kind of like, it feels more like real life in a way, in a stupid way, to cut, because
Hmm.
that's how it would be. You wouldn't have, the time to really, like, process this accident that happened. It's just really quick, and now we got to deal with the reality. And so, you know I think it's something in the 30s version about maybe seeing the car coming a little bit more or something. I
Hmm.
can't remember what it is. It's a little too long.
I do think that the 30s version is a lot more lighthearted than Cirque's, and it does play into the humor a lot more than Cirque's version. I do agree with the accident. It does feel like kind of like a gag. At first, to the point where I was like, is this the scene where she's going to lose her vision? Because the way it happened, it just felt like a joke. Whereas the Cirque version, it happens earlier in the film than the 30s version. It's a while before the 30s version that she loses her vision. So it takes longer. Like you said, they focus too much on both characters for kind of, I don't know, to explain who they are to the audience, to finally get to the main conflict. And then, whereas the Cirque one, it's done so quickly that it very much could happen like that in real life.
Yeah.
Like if someone stepped out, it's like, a cyclist and you open your door, it's very easily something that could happen. And I love that it cuts back to Bob Hudson's face right away. He is great in this movie. And I know that he was very nervous about this. It's not the first time he starred in a film, but this was like his supposed to be his breakout. And he was quite nervous about it. But I think he does a great job. I think he reacts so beautifully in this, and there's a softness to him because I think Robert Taylor's Bob Merrick is a lot more playful. And
Mhm.
then Hudson's at the start, he's just straight up like a dick. But not to the point where you don't believe that he does have softness within him. He doesn't have, like, he does have empathy because the scene where he finds out who she is, you can see it in his face without him even saying anything. And I think it's beautifully done. Just another thing. And it's not even like neither of us are trashing on the original. Like, it's still a good film. It's just, it's hard to, it's hard to beat a Cirque adaptation.
Yeah, and I think the original, it just kind of gets bogged down towards the last, I think, third, and I just kind of lost a bit of interest because, oh well, okay, yeah, sorry, that was it. The Irene Dunn, I mean, that's it, right? I'm not
Mhm.
misremembering. Sorry. When she goes blind, the very first scene, I think, she's in one of the most glamorous outfits that she's been in the whole movie, and it's really done up. And they make a joke in the Cirque version, and that the most painful scene, when she goes to the doctors, and she's, when are you going to make me a new girl again, or whatever? And
Yeah.
and she's like, I pulled out all the stops or something. I can't remember an American slang for buying a whole new outfit and everything. It's still like that outfit that she puts on is still, it feels more, I don't know, she played blind just so much better. I mean,
Yeah.
she looked like she was, actually experiencing that. She was, I mean, I just don't think, again, that, somebody who's gone blind would care that much about their appearance, to, go into this, crazy thing with a matching hat and scarf, everything.
Yeah.
And also, I liked, I don't know if it's Nancy in both versions, but the main, nurse from the hospital,
Like
uh,
Agnes Moorehead in this one.
yes, she
Yeah.
is so great in
Good.
Sirk,
Yeah.
and she really fleshes that character out. I don't know if she had like extensive mime training, but like the things that she does with her body, the body language, like when there's a scene, I think after the blindness, where she sort of comes into the frame towards her, and she's totally quiet, and towards Jane Wyman, and you feel everything without her saying a word, and there's so much gravity to that performance, and she really knocked it out of the park. And so did Rock Hudson. Also, to what you said, I don't think Robert Taylor pulled off the annoying rich cad anything like Rock Hudson did. One, he's not handsome enough to really pull that off.
Yeah.
I feel like you have to be. I mean, when Rock Hudson, I never think about height, but when Rock Hudson is in a scene with all these other characters, he's like,
I
a head and
know.
shoulders above them all. The scenes where he's framed with Agnes Moorehead, they had to, they constantly having to, you know, uh, change the whole frame just to get him into it, and there's a presence there that's undeniable, and Robert Taylor just didn't really have it, so it's a very unfair comparison. But Rock Hudson was another huge improvement.
One quick side note on the height thing. Yeah, his stature is one that you just automatically want to kind of listen to him and pay attention to him because he does command a room, despite the fact that he doesn't give off an air of arrogance at all. I don't think he ever gave that off in any of his films, but he is such a presence. And there's a scene towards the end when they go to New Mexico and he's walking through a frame, like a door frame in the hospital with a doctor. And the height difference actually made me laugh out loud. Like I just burst out laughing because I was like, they couldn't do it any other way because the camera was so far back. And he looked like it just looked like it was like a someone's father and son
Yeah,
situation.
I know exactly what the shot that you're talking about.
It was so funny. I'm gonna have to find that and post it when I put up the episode. But before we get into the second segment, which is like the before and after, which is usually a short segment, it's just to give into context what he did, where Sirk was at in his career. I do want to talk about the ending of this film. And we'll continue talking about our feelings on the film, but I do want to talk about the ending and how tracking back, we talked about how the novel was written by a pastor and how you mentioned there are Christian undertones in the both adaptations. I think Cirque doesn't play on it, but it's still there because it's hard not to have it. I think a lot of the music plays on it. I think especially the last scene and the voiceover at the end plays on it. It felt like it was, I don't know, some sort of fable, fairy tale at the end. There's two things I want to say and get your thoughts on what you felt about the voiceover at the end. And two, I read a theory that I heard a few people talk about. And you know how people like to overanalyze a lot of, like, I do this myself, overanalyze certain elements in a scene. They're talking about the ending specifically in this one because the music, the sweeping, and she says, as she's kind of waking up, she says, it doesn't hurt so much. I can see some of the light. So people think, well, did she actually wake up? Is she now in a dream? And that's why we get the voiceover at the end. Not a dream. Is she just passing through the light? Is she passing away? Some of the dialogue and the way it's framed at the end, people are like, she very much because it is so silly, kind of. Who were like, well, maybe it's because she's dead. And this is like her passing through, and this is like her final thing that she was hoping to get as she's passing through. That could be thinking too deeply in it. I did think it was interesting enough that I was like, I'd like to bring it up, see what you think. If it didn't cross my mind when I watched it, but reading about it, I was like, I could see how people could think that. So, what you think about that and the use of the voiceover?
Well, I you know, I should probably watch that maybe a couple more times before I definitively give any sort of opinions on it. Because it is, it's a hard one to get a handle on it because it's sort of, sort of meanders around a bit, and you you get the I think the main core idea of the film is just to get this, and the reason why I like it, the reason why I think it's so inspirational is this, idea of like giving of yourself to others. And I think that it's a lot less complicated than this hokum that he tries to spew, trying to make it, this
Mm.
insulating the wires and all this stuff. I just really lose interest because it sounds like crystals and stuff. But the or the religion I grew up with even. But I think that it's such a great idea that, if you are able to give of yourself to others and do it selflessly, that helps everyone. That's going to help you. It's going to help them. It helps everyone, and I think that's a really powerful, important message. And I think that's like the most important thing. And it's why, again, I think that the Sirk version, focusing more on Rock Hudson's character and his arc to get there, is about that. So, one thing I don't think I got, it's hilarious to say, this is the level I was watching it on the first time, but I knew that obviously, his magnificent obsession was going to be, Jane Wyman's character. Rock Hudson's was going to be Jane Wyman's character, and that evolves over time. What you know Getting her or whatever,
Mm.
what that means for him. At first it's very he just wants obviously to have sex with her, and she's not having any of it, and it just gets worse and worse. And then he goes around this bend, becomes this doctor, and then he's able to help her and give her sight back. I think it's just it's fairly straightforward. It's just that he needed to get to this point. He caused all this problems, and by
Mm.
all these problems, and then by the end, he is able to at least, very late in the game, try to help one of them. And so, I mean, I'm sure there's probably more meaning to be gleaned from it. That I'm, flippantly, not giving it the credit for. But I see the most, like I said, the core thing is just getting that social idea out there, of helping others, and that actually helps you. And again, once you layer it with this dogmatic religious stuff, it kind of gets a little bit
Mm.
diluted. But I also think that that's kind of what happens when people, try to read too much into every scene of a movie. Because I did see a lot, even with the whole idea of this being something, a power that can be accessed, that is sort of flowing through all of us. It's very transcendental meditation, very David Lynchy, feeding off of the power of the universe, the planet, whatever. So I think, like I said, at heart, it's like that, and it's probably honestly maybe Sirk's most Lynchian movie, not only because of that, but because of scenes like, that at the end that do, like leave you a little bit questioning. But it's also, I mean, it's not far off from the end of All That Heaven Allows, is it? I mean, it's kind of like a
Yeah.
flip side, right? It just seems like they wanted to end on the most, emotionally orgasmic moment or whatever. It's just like, oh well, they finally, I mean, that, sorry to go too far into this, but
Yeah.
they're Los Angeles is such a horny town. I guess it's rubbing off on me. Rock Hudson is very handsome. And
Yeah.
there are numerous times when you have like this lead up where in most movies they would be like, oh, well, we've got the beefcake and he's changing, so or he's going to take a shower or whatever, there are these points where like, okay, this is the moment where, now you're gonna give the fan service. And
Yeah.
it doesn't happen until the very end,
I
uh,
know. Yep.
right before the surgery. And so it's like, oh, that's the sex scene. And so I feel like really just, she's just sort of, they finally consummated their relationship and now they can, have this life. That's how I say
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up, and I'm actually so glad you brought it up because I can't believe I forgot to add that to my notes because I'd forgotten about that there is a shirtless scene because even at the beach he's still wearing a full-blown suit, which is I was like, sir, I know it's hot. I don't know, I can't remember where this is supposed to be set, but I'm sure it's somewhere on either coast, and it looked like it was warm most of the time. But the one scene that he does is shirtless. I mean, I gasped. He is a very gorgeous man, but it is interesting when it's placed. And I think it's exactly what you said. Yeah, it's very much, I think, the type of quote unquote sex scene that Sirk would ever put in his films.
yeah.
You're not going to get more than that. And I think it works for the story. It wouldn't work in others, but it works for his stories and the way he's crafting his stories. We'll continue talking about just our personal thoughts, but taking a quick break from that, just because we have been talking about Sirk and him as an artist and type of films that he has made that we all know, but he has a wider filmography outside of the films that we know. Admittedly, a lot of the films, especially the early German films, are very difficult to find because he made them in Germany during the war. And as far as I know, I don't think they're lost. They're just quite difficult to find. But he still worked within the Hollywood system once he finally came over to America. And a lot of stuff in the 50s, it's kind of the way a lot of sort of popular art directors do now, where they do one for them, one for me. So I'm going to do stuff so that I can continue working. Nowadays, it's I need to make money so that I can start make my own movie. He's still working within the system, so he's just doing it so that he can continue working. So what he releases three films in 1954, one of them being Magnificent Obsession. So right before this, in August, sorry, was released in August of 1954. In February of 1954, what comes out is a film called Taza, Son of Cochise. I did watch it, oddly enough. I found it on a Russian streaming site. And the one that is after Magnificent Obsession, I also watched on the same Russian streaming site. The Russians like to preserve old films. Hey,
It's got to do it.
look, someone's got to do it. And I thank them for their service. But watch this. It's 79 minutes. It's a 3D film that was, for some reason, shot. It was released in 2D, though. Even at the time, it was released in 2D. But you can see certain scenes that were obviously supposed to be 3D. But it's a Western. I won't get too much into the story, but it's set after the end of the Apache War. And it's about a man called Taza, played by Rock Hudson in brownface. Yep, all the Native American actors who have speaking roles are played by white people in brownface, including Barbara Rush, who plays the daughter in Magnificent Obsession, in like some intense brownface. So it's a lot. It's also not the first time I've seen Rock Hudson in brownface. He did it before this. So that's already leading up to it's a lot. And not to excuse it, I'm really not excusing, but unfortunately, it's not the only film that's ever had people in brownface. So if you watched any Western of a certain era where they just were not allowing, the studio system was not allowing Native American speaking roles to be played by Native American actors, you're getting Rock Hudson in brownface with an accent. I don't know what that accent was. I assume he is an Apache accent. It's a lot, definitely offensive. But this was a director for hire situation. So he was assigned this project. This is not a That being said, he still thinks in his mind it was his favorite film.
Casa Son of Cochise.
Yes. And reading the book, because I read that tidbit before I read the book, and I was like, okay, but reading the book, I understand why. I don't think it's the story is his favorite. I think the experience of shooting a Western is his favorite. And as someone who loves Westerns, but also can understand why people don't, but he talks a lot about before he got to Hollywood and was working in on sets and in the studio lots. When he was doing a lot of German films, he would get to shoot outdoors a lot and on location. He didn't get to do that when he was in Hollywood, except for I think they shot some of this and outdoors, and he loves shooting outdoors. And he said that if he had been an American Hollywood director, he would have wanted to do more Westerns. And rewatching his stuff, I actually wondered why he never made like a grand sweeping Western, something like a Giant, not something that's like Indian versus cowboys, or the American soldiers Western, like this one is. I think that he would have something like, I don't know if you've seen Giant or the audience if you've seen Giant, but something that's more of it's set in Texas. It also has Rock Hudson in it. Uh, and it's one of my favorites. I love Giant. It's a huge 3 hour epic, and it's fantastic. It's James Dean's last film and Elizabeth Taylor. But something like that, where it's a human story. It's following this family from like their youth until their late period in their life. Rock Hudson's fantastic in it, but something like that, I feel like he very much could have filmed something like that. So it is interesting that he does Taz's Son of Cochise right before Magnificent Obsession, which was kind of like the movie that broke him through in Hollywood. And that was more of a passion project, obviously, because you can see the heart and soul in it that you don't see in Tazza Son of Cochise. It's very well shot. And I do want to talk in the third segment about his frequent collaborator, cinematographer Russell Meddy, who also worked on that. But that's all I need to say about Tazza Son of Cochise. What he does right after that, which is released in December of 1954, is Sign of the Pagan. This one I didn't like so much. Tazza Son of Cochise, as much as it's problematic, at least it's only 79 minutes, and it moved fast. Sign of the Pagan, I personally just don't like Roman Empire stories. I find them dull, and I find them to drag. I think this is an hour and a half, hour and 40, but it felt like a long time. And again, more brown face. Got Jack Palance playing Attila the Hun with brown face that's like darker than me. I was like, what are we actually doing here? It was shocking. I had to take a picture and send it to someone because I was like, this is shocking. It just is a lot. It's very distracting and it was unenjoyable and it felt like they had no Sirk elements at all, in my opinion. He didn't really talk about this movie either. This is again another director for hire situation. So where he was assigned this film. So it's interesting. All three, sorry, those films come out the exact same year. It could not be more different, with Magnificent Obsession being sandwiched in between. I know you haven't seen the other two, but as someone who has seen like his greatest hits, and I'm not saying you ever need to seek out these movies, but just if you have any thoughts about the fact that there are a lot of Douglas Sirk films out there that are so different from the Sirk that we all know, and the fact that people still had to work and do. It's not like nowadays where you can be a director and be revered and only have like 6 or 7 movies under your belt. You had to keep working back then.
Well, it looks like maybe the Joel Schumacher comparison was apt because
Mhm.
Joel Schumacher was definitely director for hire, type a lot, and his films didn't really have a strong visual style most of the time. I mean, The Client, Time to Kill, Flatliners, Falling Down, St. Elmo's Fire. Oh, a lot
Forgot
of
he
my
did that.
favorites, The Incredible Shrinking Woman, Lily Tomlin, or even Hell Behind De Palma again, the uh, he did some movies that don't feel like Brian De Palma movies. I guess everybody. I think of Steven Soderbergh too. I mean, I know all my references are at least 20 years old. But and I was never a big Soderbergh fan, but he's I'm always amazed when people tell me that they like those Ocean's 11 movies.
Mm.
But I'm sorry if you like them. I don't. I hate hype. So
I think I've seen one,
okay,
and I
so
don't remember it.
yeah, as it should be in my opinion. But also I don't want to do anything. But I mean, it just seems like he puts himself fully into the ones where he can go a little bit crazy. Uh, and yeah, I mean, I was just watching while you were talking about Taza. I was watching the trailer for it on IMDb,
Yeah.
and you're right. I mean, my gosh, Barbara Rush, wow, that must have taken forever to scrape off. God. And even and sometimes it just looked like Hudson had a tan, but
Yes.
in some shots in that trailer, he really, oof.
Yeah. It's um because I've seen a lot of westerns, I'm still shocked every time, but sometimes certain people's makeup they do, like, not that Hudson looks like he could be uh indigenous to anywhere, but probably somewhere in Europe. But Barbara Rush's makeup and then Jack Palance, Sign of the Pagan, I was like, I don't know where you got this reference from, but I don't think anyone's actually that color in real life. I don't know what Pride and Brown you're looking for, but I don't think that's the correct. We needed to blend some other stuff going on here.
It's an American thing, clearly, with our current leadership. Odd skin tones, odd artificial skin. But also speaking of the problematic stuff, I loved that the most problematic probably scene in Magnificent Obsession has our main female lead. Her only line is just commenting on it, saying "ugh."
What scene is this?
When they're on the beach and they're reading the funnies, and she plays, because she can't read,
Yes,
the only line that apparently the Native American character says is "ugh," and it's very uncomfortable. You're like, oh, this is supposed to be charming.
I know. I know. I obviously blocked that out because I watched the other two after these other two that you just spoke about. So I obviously was like, oh yeah, there was no problematic stuff in it's an obsession.
It's very light. It's very light.
It's very light. Definitely could be worse, as we all know. But that's the before and after on that. So it just puts things into perspective just in terms of his career. It also kind of puts into perspective why he was forgotten for so long after, because he did kind of blend in, and although he made a star of someone like Rock Hudson, who we all think of from those movies, a lot of people don't at the time weren't thinking of Sirk, though. They were thinking of Rock Hudson. They were thinking of whoever female lead was in those movies. But now Sirk is like a huge name who did influence a lot of people before he influenced a lot of directors before he became a name more widely today. On the third segment, and just the trademarks, we've talked about a lot of them so far, but a couple ones I just wanted to kind of expand on, specifically because I want to talk to you as someone who is very big on scores and is very knowledgeable. Frank Skinner, frequent collaborator, composer. He composed a lot of the films that they worked on, and we kind of discussed a little bit the score here. Wondering how you feel about this collaboration here. Because I noticed even in the last two movies I just talked about, he was also the composer. And then the music is something that is like a good point in the films. Even like what I want to talk about, Russell Meddy, the cinematographer, and the costume designer, Bill Thomas, who he worked with on all those films too. Those are all people that he worked with are the good points that you can pull out of the films that are not so great. Frank Skinner, uh, I don't know that I'm super familiar with his other work outside of Sirk's films. I don't know if you are, but
I knew But he's definitely been, yeah, relegated to more obscurity than some of the bigger names, like Miklos Rocha or Franz Waxman, Max Steiner, all that. But I think, a lot of people, I don't know, I think maybe one of the problems that people have with melodrama is that it reminds them too frequently that they're watching a movie. And
Yes.
I've known a lot of people like this over the years that are like, I don't like to be taken out of it, and it's like they have this sort of childlike, gauze over their eyes when they're watching movies, and they don't actually want to think about people making them and, editing
Yes.
them and putting time and effort into them before, during, after and how long of a process it is, and what a combination of all these things, as everybody likes to point out these days.
Yeah.
But music for me, it's something I've never been able to not hear. I know that a lot of even prominent film composers, like John Williams, would say that they don't want their music to be heard. I don't
Mm,
understand that. I don't understand, especially John Williams seems to be grabbing for every bit of attention he can most of the time. But Frank Skinner and these movies, particularly this one. I mean, this one with the choir, it just really
hmm
leaps out at you so many times. And I just think that it's lovely. I think it adds to it. I mean, it's gotten a lot of backlash for its extreme tweeness over the years, but when Amelie came out in 2001, I was almost exclusively hearing Jan Tiersen's music. I just it was so integral to the movie. It was more the movie than that, and it shouldn't take over like that, but I don't think Frank Skinner's does. I think it comes in and gives you exactly what you need in the moment that you need it. Says, okay, this is the big rush of emotion. It's playing the emotions, and it's not telling you how to feel. It's just giving you, again, it's sort of like giving you the permission to feel it.
hmm
And I think that's something that's been greatly misunderstood about melodrama for a long time. And my stepmom's favorite movie for years and years she would talk about was Imitation of Life, always. And she was always telling me about it. Like late teens, early 20s until I finally watched it. And but I think she definitely knew when she was going into that movie, the reason why she liked it is because this is big emotions. It gives me this this space to feel these things, and even if the exact particulars of the story, the plot are not something that you specifically, like when you mentioned the blindness, it is particular, but it also is something that you could just say, well, I got an incurable diagnosis. I got, something, or, you could apply it to so many different things. And that's what these things give you the permission to feel for. And the music just, it oils all of that and just sort of like makes it even prettier and more enjoyable.
No, I mean the listener can't see, but I'm like aggressively nodding because I agree with everything. And so I'm so glad that you're on this episode because I knew that you'd have something that you'd be able to say, put into words how I felt a lot better than I could. I think that everything you said is spot on, especially the idea of his music giving permission to feel. Because I know a lot of people's complaints about scores nowadays is like, oh, I feel like it's forcing me to feel sad or feel happy, which is fair. A lot of times I feel like people are overreacting to the score because sometimes movies call for grander scores, like you said. John Williams is. I didn't know that he didn't want people to hear because I thought he explicitly was trying to get people to hear his music over. I don't think it's either directing you how to feel, but I was like, it still wants to be heard. Frank Skinner's is a little softer, but I think it is being like, I know if you're not already feeling this way, let's feel this way together, as opposed to being like, okay, now is your time to cry. Now is your time to laugh. And it's not overbearing, but it's also not trying to hide in the background because anytime it came up, I was like, it felt so pretty and beautiful. It didn't feel like it was fluff or added on for just because they needed to add music. So I think his work with Skinner is very good. And I was looking at some of his other stuff. There's a few things I've seen, but I wouldn't remember the music off the top of my head. I'd have to go back and listen to it. So I think it's really beautifully used in this movie. So I love that he worked often with Frank Skinner. Another person he worked with often was cinematographer Russell Meddy. So all the big films that you know, except for Tarnished Angels, which is not Russell Meddy, which is in black and white. Not that Meddy, I'm pretty sure he probably shot in black and white at some point, but he shot all of his color films in America. And I think the use of color is obviously something that is so ingrained in a Sirk film that it's hard not to think of the way that these films are shot. And like you said, the camera's not showy. It's not sweeping, I think, in any sort of way, but it still feels like every shot is very deliberate and planned out. It doesn't feel like they just decided on a whim on the day, hey, let's just do this. And maybe they did. And good for them that it looks like, well thought out and planned. I just love Russell Meddy's work with Sirk, and every frame just looks absolutely gorgeous. It would be shocking to me to see something ugly. And even in these other two films, like Taza and Sign of the Pagan, they're so beautifully shot. It makes it worth if anyone ever comes across them for some reason, you can at least appreciate the way they look because even like in Taza Sanakuchi's, do you get the desert landscapes? It's gorgeous, the yellows here. And the use of colors in this movie is just absolutely phenomenal. And I know you likely feel the same way, but just knowing that you've seen a lot of his other big films that were also shot by Manny, how you feel about the work here and his other work with him.
I think this is probably I mentioned when you were asking me about Cirque that this was my favorite, even though it was probably my favorite, even though I had hazy memories on it. But I think there is a clarity in this one that outshines most of the other ones, and I was really surprised to find out this was the first of the five that I knew, because it feels more like a later one. I mean, I think Imitation of Life, there's a similar, as I recall, beautiful clarity of image, and those beautiful warm, vibrant colors. I feel like Written on the Wind was a little bit more muted. All That Heaven Allows, I think was generally that one's pretty colorful. I believe it's been a few years since I've seen it. Tarnished Angels definitely shows that that was not the same collaborator, because I
Uh,
until I noticed until I saw just now how late that one was, I thought that was in the 40s. It looks
mm,
so older and so much more old-fashioned and simplistic. It feels like a completely different visual style. So I wonder how much was coming from Mehdi, and how much was coming from Cirque. You look at some really amazing visual directors. I always say Spielberg. That's one of his greatest qualities, is you can always tell a Spielberg film from the photography,
yeah.
no matter who the cinematographer is, and you can always see those Spielberg shots because you can just see how his mind is working to tell the story. And there's a scene early on in Magnificent Obsession, where I think it's Jane Wyman and Barbara Rush are coming in the car, home, and to find the husband dead, the husband father dead, and the cops have just left, and I love a little quick shot of them. I feel sorry for them or whatever, uh, and then it just when they come down in that beautiful car and that lush green landscape with the flowers everywhere, and Agnes Moorehead, coming out to greet them and all that. There's something about the way that camera is just sort of moving around and just very confidently capturing this thing. And again, like you said, not showy, but just keeping it all in. And it's one of those things where I don't know if, like, it feels like someone with a natural eye is capturing it,
Mm,
because it doesn't feel you would have to storyboard with something like that. You go and you do it in the day, but you have to have somebody that is capturing that action and following it, and keeping it all in this careful framing. So I think that's why it feels that sort of control feels so just what's the word, abundant in Cirque. No, I don't know. It just it's like I said, it's almost sort of like that Kubrick kind of thing where you just feel like it could be a simple shot, but it was probably done until it was right. It looks effortless, but in some ways, you might think that some smaller shots like that would be effortless, but you get a sense that a lot of time went into every single tiny piece.
yes. I know. Uh, I don't think I ever read how long it took to film this one, but the ones that he was director for hire was like sometimes he would shoot in like a week or two. But these ones that I know, which is insane. I was like, how do you shoot a movie in a week? But that's how they were operating back in the day. But these ones, he was afforded the time, which he always liked to have the time to do. He's like, I can shoot a film quickly, but if I get the time to do it, if I get the time to sit with the characters and with my team, uh, it always turns out better. And that's why this is the movie we're talking about, and we're not doing a podcast on Taz Son of Cheese. But he did say that he loved working with Mediby because they complemented each other so well. In his mind, he thought that the lighting and all the vibrancy of the colors came from Medi, but I think he's underplaying also his influence on the thing. I think they just meshed really well. And he had nothing but kind words to say about his work with him, which is great to hear. One of the other frequent collaborators, because we talked about costumes and how the producer really loved having either lavish gowns or outfits. And costume designer Bill Thomas is who designed this film and worked on a lot of Cirque films. And I really noticed the outfits this time. I'm glad that you mentioned Imitation of Life because everyone remembers the gowns in that film. I didn't remember the outfits as much in this one. I remember in All the Heaven Allows, Written on the Wind, the outfits, but this one on the wrist rewatch, it was beautiful that they were like complementing colors of their outfits together, even complementing certain patterns. At some point, he has like a little, I don't know what you call that, around his neck that had like polka dots, and she was wearing something with polka dots, and they'd be like she was wearing striped and he had something with stripes, or they're both wearing green in certain areas or blues. And it just was beautiful to see it complemented that way. And the outfits are beautiful, even down to like the cat eye glasses that she's wearing when she goes down the steps. Gorgeous. And I love his work with Bill Thomas in his films because everyone always looks decked out. Sometimes it's just nice to watch actors look their best. How you feel about, I mean, I know we kind of briefly talked about the reason why these films have such great costumes, but just your thoughts on the costumes here versus his other bigger ones, because I find there's a little bit of a difference between each one.
Yeah, I think in Magnificent Obsession, I think they do blend a bit more. They're much more realistic, even though I'm sure they're
Mm,
not.
yeah.
But maybe for people of their stature at that time, who knows? I feel like yeah, later on, all that heaven allows, particularly Imitation of Life, they're much flashier and eye catching, and sometimes to the detriment of the film. There are things in this one where you don't really notice some of the matching the first time. I
Mhm.
was going back just to sort of like get a visual look at some of it this afternoon, and noticed that I think in the beginning scene. the first scene that we see Jane Wyman and Barbara Rush, they're dressed very similar. They're very matching. There, always key differences, and it's interesting. The way, I don't know, I didn't look at how old Jane Wyman was when this was made, but she's, they make more of age differences in the 30s version, and not to get too far off on that, but she's dressed much more like a mature woman in this
Hmm.
movie than I think. It was just a weird misstep in that 30s one to have some really like designery gowns on Irene Dunn, especially like I said after she went blind. But overall, I think that the music, the cinematography, or the lighting, the costumes, they're like performances. They shouldn't ever be completely blended in, but they should be integrated. And I think that maybe Magnificent Obsession, even with all of the new agey elements and the spiritual stuff, it might be the more grounded one of all of those, well, besides Turner's Angels. Well, maybe besides Written on the Wind. Sorry. Yeah, they just they add so much that, and they all seem to add up to what people decided after the fact. Once Sirk's career had crystallized, it's like, okay, well, let's pick these ones and say this is the Sirk style. But like you say,
Hmm.
he had a lot of different ones, and I don't think most people would look at Tarnished Angels and say, oh, well, that's a Douglas Sirk film. So
Exactly. Outside of like the cast being one that he's worked with before, um, you can see in the story that there are some flourishes of Sirk's, but if you had just put on that movie, didn't see his name, I don't know that you would automatically think it's a Sirk film. Whereas if you put on Magnificent Obsession and for some reason you hadn't seen it before, but you knew Sirk immediately from the the offset, you're gonna be like, oh, this has to be Sirk or someone who's inspired by Sirk, which we have seen in film history post Sirk. A lot of directors who've been influenced by him. Even someone like, I think there's no way that David Lynch wasn't influenced by Sirk. Something like Blue Velvet is very Sirk.
yes,
Very Sirk. Yeah, it's interesting to see the team that he works with and how those trademarks play out in this film compared to his other ones. But before we wrap things up and go to the very last questions, I do want to ask if there's any points that we haven't discussed that you want to bring up.
well, it sucks in a way that the I don't know, the way that this mystical thing is described.
Mm,
Uh, I feel like they had a lot of problems making it sound as simple as it as should be. And I feel like it's such an important thing. Like I already said all this, but yeah, I think it's that core idea of this film that to get out there. They tried to do it in the early 2000s, I think, with Pay It Forward. I don't know if you remember this movie.
yeah,
Uh,
is that with like Helen Hunt? Is it
yes,
Helen Hunt in it? Okay.
Kevin Spacey and Haley Joel
Oh
Osment.
yeah.
And
Yes.
it's Haley Joel Osment saying, if one person does a good deed, whatever, and passes it on, and everybody does a good deed, it leads to people, buying other people's Starbucks, a line behind
Yeah.
them. Where does that end? That doesn't really, it's not a very helpful thing to somebody else's Starbucks. But if you go around quietly helping people in need and in meaningful ways, and that's something that we all need, especially in this current day and age.
Yep. I I found myself also again, even in the Cirque version, kind of like what you said, a little bit tuning out when they're trying to get into the mechanics of all of it because it just felt like they're over explaining it and now it's confusing. Whereas, like you said, it's a lot more simple than they're making it out to be. So that is a fault of, I think, just the story. And part of me is interested to, if I ever get the chance, I don't know how bored I would be to read the novel because I hear it's not written really well, and I'm not really that interested in reading a book by a pastor, but I would be interested in maybe skimming to see how he tackled it. I'd skim it, cliff notes it maybe.
Braver than I.
It's all for the research. I say that, and I'll when I go to edit it, I'll be like, yeah, I'm not doing that. But um, that was Magnificent Obsession. I still have one more question for you though, and it's a double bill question. If you're going to pair this with another film or films, if you have multiple options, what would you pair it with and why?
Okay. I found the perfect pairing movie for
Oh, okay.
this. uh, it's it's hilarious because it came to me before I realized the amount of connections that it has. It may not have as many as it seemed, but 1960, David Swift, Haley Mills, Pollyanna, which also stars Jane Wyman and
Mm-hmm.
Agnes Moorehead.
Yes.
Mm, I would put it after this because I think it's a much better film. But I think it's much more complicated in general. They're different. It's apples and oranges, but I think it's both of them have this thing about making small social changes and giving positive positivity, energy, to the world around you, and making the world around you a better place. And I think that's wonderful. Uh, Agnes Moorehead is so good, and Jane Wyman too. And both of them that they are different people, completely different people. I mean, and it was I think 6 years, made 6 years later. So Agnes Moorehead, you get her in Magnificent Obsession as the Citizen Kane Agnes Moorehead, and then in Pollyanna you get her as leaning into the Endora Agnes
Oh,
Moorehead.
okay. Nice.
Uh, but Jane Wyman, it could be almost a continuation of the story because she's got this bad past with a lover that and who is no Rock Hudson. I can't remember that actor's name. Richard. No. Anyway, he's no Rock Hudson. But they both, like I said, they both have this very sweet thing. They're both based on horrible novels, also,
Mm, okay.
because Pollyanna, never read it. It is a miracle. Actually, the only good reason to read Pollyanna is to see how on earth David Swift was able to get such a wonderful film out of such a terrible, terrible book. And it also, God, if you thought Pollyanna was corny, there is nothing cornier than that book. But
Oh yeah.
yeah, I just they're both Technicolor, movies. Obviously, one was Pollyanna doesn't have quite the visual flair, and it doesn't have that dreamy Sirk quality. But yeah, that's what that I think it would be the perfect pairing. When I came up with it in my head, that was
No,
it's
I
like
I think that's fantastic. But Pollyanna came up obviously when I was doing my research. So when you mentioned it, I was like, that's so funny. I knew immediately. I was like, okay, yes. I didn't realize Agnes Moorehead was also in it. You talked about that movie before, and it's been on my list to watch. So I'm glad that you brought it up again because I will actively search out a copy. My pairing is, and I probably would put this before Magnificent Obsession, and I kind of played on the dreamy quality and of Sirk films and kind of the dreamy. I kind of was stuck on that ending of this movie, so I thought of a Henry Hathaway film from 1935 called Peter Ibbotson. It's Gary Cooper in that movie, and it's kind of parallels this where it's like two people who are going to be end up together but keep getting broken apart through circumstances. It's not a new story. That's the story that's been done before, but there are a lot of kind of fantasy elements in that story, which is interesting for a time like 1935 to be adding that. And kind of asking a lot of an audience, even now, to fully be like, you need to be on board with what you're watching. Otherwise, you're just going to be criticizing, well, that doesn't make sense. It's not supposed to. It's like a fantasy. It is a fantasy film guised under a romance film. So if you like the kind of fantastical-ish elements of Magnificent Obsession, I'd watch that one before this. That one's in black and white, but it's very beautifully shot. It's like a soft, very dreamy black and white. So, and then you get like if you want another kind of very attractive male lead, you get Gary Cooper and you get Rock Hudson. I really don't think you can go wrong with, with either. Sounds like a good night to me. But yeah, that would be my pairing.
I did have, you can cut this out, but
I
I did
know.
have another wild card one idea.
No, please tell me.
It would also be after Eyes Wide Shut.
Okay.
I know it's a bit of a stretch, but visually, I think Eyes Wide Shut, I think, is one of Kubrick's most colorful films, and it's beautifully shot. It's got some, all those rear process shots, walking shots and all that stuff feels very, of another time, but also I remember it also feeling modern, in '99 or whenever. But you both focus on sort of rich, listless playboys that are sort of floundering, and both are trying to solve all of their problems with money, trying to throw money at it, and they just get to a point where they realize that isn't going to work anymore. It's a little bit of a stretch, and it's more on the negative side. Pollyanna would be the much more positive way to go. It's like, let's pick out the really good part about it. Eyes Wide Shut would be sort of focusing on but I mean, they do both sort of come out of it at the end. I don't know. Maybe Magnificent Obsession should be second. I don't know.
I mean, I don't know. I would trust your instinct on it. But Eyes Wide Shut, when you first mentioned it, I was like, oh, that's interesting. But then when you broke it down, I was like, I could totally see that as a pairing. I think that's both equally fantastic pairing. But like you said, it's kind of like Eyes Wide Shut would be slightly more of a downer
Yeah.
than the other two. But hey, you could also triple bill it if you want. I don't know how long Eyes Wide Shut is. I feel like it's at least 2 hours, probably longer, knowing Kubrick.
It's
2.5
definitely longer than 2 hours, but I don't. It's hard. Yeah, again with that, that the way that he shoots things, that steady
Yeah.
hand, I get so hypnotized that I rarely think about the time, which is rare because I often think about time in movies. But yeah, what a wild triple bill that would be. Magnificent Obsession, Eyes Wide Shut, then Pollyanna.
It feels like something you could watch on Christmas Day. I feel like a triple bill for Christmas Day, I think. Why not? Or Christmas Eve. Hey, you're home already, so you might as well. You can watch 3 good movies. But I am so grateful to have had you on for Magnificent Obsession. I think the conversation went even better than I anticipated. I knew it was going to be good, but you brought up such a fantastic points, and I just beyond grateful because it makes me look even smarter. So thank you so much for coming on the show. I genuinely appreciate it.
I genuinely appreciate you having me back. I'm glad you think it went well. I might have to listen to it with one of my ears closed.
That's fine.
Not that that would do any,
No, I know what you mean. I very listen to when I guest on other people's podcasts. I don't listen to myself. I'm like, I don't want to deal with that again. But it's nice for me to get to listen to this one again when I'm editing. So I look forward to hearing the conversation again. Seeing Faces in Movies is an official podcast of the Royal Film Club. It's hosted and edited by Felicia, with intro music by Lamar Walker. If you like what you heard, let us know at seeingfacesandmovies.com or send us an email at seeingfacesandmovies@gmail.com. And while you're at it, please subscribe and rate the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. And stay tuned for our next episode on The Tarnished Angels. watch movies, and we'll see you next time.